another thing people bring up with homeschooling is like the socialization thing. Like,
Oh,
how are they
right.
going to be socialized? But it's the same thing. It's like, do you want people to be socialized in this artificial environment where they're only allowed to interact with people their same age and only under one, like a teacher's supervision? And only, I mean, that is not real world socialization at all.
Like nobody teaches a kid how to talk. Nobody teaches a kid how to walk. Like these are all basic things. It always reminds me of, I think it's Nassim Taleb. He had this whole thing about teaching birds to fly. He's like, you could have a Harvard professor sit down, like do this whole lecture for like, weeks of these baby birds and like showing them like aerodynamics and like teaching them physics. And then at the end of the semester, the birds are flying. And the professor's like, I am a great professor. I have taught the birds how to fly.
This is my conversation with Nat and Martha Sharpe. Nat and Martha are both filmmakers. In February 2023, they won a fellowship through O'Shaughnessy Ventures to explore alternative education. We talk about making movies before YouTube, just doing stuff, the O'Shaughnessy Fellowship, alternative education and parenting, social media heuristics, and much more. This was a really fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy it.
As a kid, I was always I watched a lot of movies, and I have always been interested in stories and storytelling and the importance of that. Um, and that's why, like, and so like in college, I ended up writing my senior thesis on the importance of storytelling. Um, and later on, when I met Nat, he was giving a presentation to a bunch of college kids because he had just been to film school, and it was on storytelling. And he chose a few movies for his presentation that were amazing choices, in my opinion. So I wrote an email
Good
to him.
taste.
Yeah, good taste. So I wrote an email to him afterwards, which I don't even remember doing, but he found it later, just basically complimenting him and saying, "Well done, story man."
Yeah. So that was the first time we met, was like when I was giving a presentation on like the hero's journey and kind of, the Joseph Campbell. And it was really funny because, yeah, I mean, I had been through like this 1 year film school, and it was a lot of fun, but I also kind of got burned out. And then when Martha and I, she really wanted to make a movie, like write a screenplay and, like make a real like movie. But I
Mhm.
was just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to, like, I knew like too much by that point, right? Like I had spent all this time like learning the professional way of doing it, and all the thousands of dollars of lighting equipment and sound equipment that a movie needs.
Yeah.
So it was no longer like a fun little hobby for me like it was growing up. But she was very persuasive, and so I said, okay, if you write the screenplay, then I will direct the movie and edit it and all that stuff.
Right.
And you did.
And
Yeah.
I grew up before YouTube, right? When I was a kid, there was no YouTube, there was no TikTok, there was no way for just ordinary people to make a movie. So even though I wanted to make a movie so bad, I thought the only thing I could do was to like learn how to like write screenplays and submit them and try to get them approved by Hollywood or something. Like there weren't as many options for someone to just start making movies.
Yeah, how did
Right.
publishing look like back then?
We didn't. I mean,
You just don't.
yeah, like I guess when we were doing it, that was like 2008 or nine. So like I think YouTube was a thing,
For
but
you, he's younger
You're
than
starting
you.
out.
no, when we met, like that was
Oh, when we
2000,
met, yeah,
2009.
yeah, yeah. There was YouTube then. Yeah, yeah,
But anyways, the movie we ended up making was just like, it was like 20 minutes long. We got our friends together. It was like a tickle. It was called the Tickle Monster, the Terrible Tickle Monster,
yeah.
and it was like a Beowulf adaptation with like music from Fiddler on the Roof and Mary Poppins. It was just really, really weird and bizarre. But we had a lot of fun making it, and then we just basically made it with our friends for our friends.
Mhm.
I think all the copies are gone now. They've all been lost.
I know, it's so
It's,
sad.
it's very sad. But so that was basically like how we fell in love, like making that
Mhm.
movie, and then a year later we got married. So
Right, like the editing process. Like I had only ever just written screenplays before myself, and that's kind of my forte. But Nat's forte is like the editing process, and there's
no,
so much storytelling in the editing process. You have all this footage, but you have to figure out how to put it together to basically weave the story together and
Yes.
communicate it visually
Yeah.
too.
And then we actually, so shortly after we got married, and then while we were expecting our first kid, we ended up making a documentary, like a longer documentary.
Hmm.
And we really experienced it there because like we just filmed tons of stuff. We were both living in like this little commune of like 30 people.
Hmm.
This very alternative kind of lifestyle group that I was born in.
Right.
Um,
And there was
so
no
yeah,
screenplay for this one
right,
because
right,
we
yeah.
didn't know what was going to happen
It
because we were
was
filming real life.
exactly.
I was pregnant with our first child and we didn't know what was going to happen with that. Like, and she ended up being like almost a month late. And anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just
And then there was
filming real life. You don't know what kind of stories are going to emerge,
and there was a woman in the community who was in her uh late 50s who had cancer. She had just found out she had a terminal diagnosis. So we were filming her process basically of dying while we were also filming our first child being born.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it was a really interesting experience. But then
Mm.
after the first kid, and then we ended up having 4 kids in 5 years.
Yeah,
We didn't have a lot of time to make movies,
we were a little
so
busy.
Fa- Fast forward to a couple years ago, and you all went full time living on the road in an RV. What
Hmm.
inspired
that
you to do that?
right,
That's me
Martha.
again. I've
Yeah,
always wanted
yeah,
I've always wanted to live in an RV. Um, even in high school, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to get an old school bus and convert it to an RV and just travel around the country with our friends or whatever? So
yeah.
I thought about it for a long time. And then of course on YouTube I see all these families doing it and I'm like, maybe maybe we could do it too. And then finally, like when COVID hit and Nat's job went fully remote, and of course we were homeschooling, so we weren't tied to a school or anything. It was like the time was right. We'd been saving up for a down payment on a house, and we just used that to get an RV instead, and we did it.
Yeah,
How
that was a
long did
great purchase. What was that?
Sorry, how long did you do that for?
For about a year, pretty
Yeah,
much exactly a year.
yeah,
Yeah.
for an entire year. We
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, we basically got rid of everything we own except the essentials and stuck it in the RV.
Yeah.
Um, and it was one of those things too, where it's just like, yeah, we were both at home, right, working remotely, and it was like we realized like that was the one opportunity
Hmm.
to do it. Like, and it's like, but it was still like hard. Like, so even though it was something you had thought about for years,
Right.
like when it actually came down to it, she was actually more terrified than I was. Like, I was.
Right. Like I had dreamed of it, but he's the one who actually went to the bank and got the money. And I freaked out, like, wait, are we really doing this?
Yeah.
What? Like we're actually taking action. We're not just
Yeah.
imagining
So I guess I mean
it.
that's kind of a common theme in our life and marriage too. It's just like how can we live a life where it's not just in our heads, right? Where it's not like both of us are kind of like I mean, I'm much more like in my head than she is, but
Hmm.
I think we both have that tendency to a certain degree. Like very, very active imaginations, kind of we can kind of like rationalize and see my problem is I think I can predict what's gonna happen.
Hmm.
So then I'm like, well, why do I even have to do it?
Yeah, and then my
Which
problem
is
is
completely
that
false. It's like it doesn't work that way.
I have desires that I think are just way beyond my reach. So I just end up imagining them and just endlessly researching them and not
Oh
actually
right.
doing them. So so we kind of balance each other out because the things I imagine and desire, he actually pushes me to do in real life. And then
Yeah,
and then you definitely I definitely force you to get out of your head a little more too.
definitely. Yeah. And I
Um
would say like
Interesting.
the first part of our marriage, we it definitely I was resisting her ideas and stuff a lot. And then about halfway through, about few years ago at least, I realized all the crazy ideas she's had, they've always turned out to like moving across the country or like all these crazy things we've done. They've always turned out better than the situation we were before. Um, so that's like what happened with the RV thing. I was like, okay, you know what? Like this sounds like a crazy idea. There's absolutely no reason we have to do it. We're gonna become homeless basically, but everything else seems to be lining up. So why not? Right?
why not? Yeah, he realized that, well, one thing is that it helped when you realize that when I come up with an idea to do something, you don't have to do it for me,
Oh, right. Yeah,
right?
that's very important.
All he has to do is just say yes. That's all I'm looking for, is just encouragement.
That's
I'm
very
not looking for someone else to do it for me. Um, which is actually really different than, I think, is really different from a lot of relationships. Like when we were full-time RVing, we got together with some other full-time families, and I told them at one of our little meetings, like, that we had installed a composting toilet in our RV, and that it was so much better than having to mess with the black tank. Because I was sitting there listening to everyone, and everyone was just complaining about their black tanks. That's where, the toilet stuff
the
goes.
Sure, yeah.
In case you don't know.
disgusting.
Yeah, like, how do you deal with the smell? How do you deal with this and that? And I'm just like, well, you know what? We installed a composting toilet and it's so much better. And then they're like, oh, tell us more. Now I'm the one who did it. I made this composting toilet. I designed it, I made it, I installed it, and just I did it myself. But after this meeting, all the men, all the husbands they came up to me and said, you just made a lot more work for us husbands. I'm like, why? I mean, Nat didn't do it.
Yeah.
If your wives want a composting toilet, just
No.
let them make it. um, so I mean, there's probably some differences in our relationship than with other people's, but yeah.
I discovered Nat through his "You Can Just Do Stuff" video, which I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, I think I've seen it so many times now, and yeah, it just reminds me of that. It was a wonderful video, and found it a bit weird, which is probably why I found it pretty good. So
That's yes.
yeah, that was,
Those are the kind of movies I make by myself. The kind of movies I make by myself are very weird. It's
which is
not
good.
quite.
Weird is
Oh,
good.
I'm glad you like them. But yeah, that's kind of that's why I have it pinned to my profile though. Is like that's one of the lessons I would say I've learned in my life. Is just like, as someone that overthinks everything, as someone that overanalyzes, and has like, I've had crippling anxiety, panic attacks, all sorts of terrible things, and it seemed like over and over again the lesson is just like not letting that fear stop you from doing something.
Mhm.
And the ironic thing is that like the fear is so easily rationalized as reason. And I think Visa can be on Twitter. He just did a thread on this, which was so good. But basically, the idea that I think it was like, the smarter you are, like the more easy it is to scare yourself. I think that's what he said,
Mm.
and I totally identify with that. And what I found though is that the most rational thing you can do is just try stuff. Is literally just do things you haven't done before, because what happens is that brings in new information.
Mhm.
Like, so all this weird stuff I've done, all these weird videos I do, all this, like, I mean, part of the reason I'm doing those videos is because they're scary for me to make and then to publish, right? Like, it's actually like, who cares what the effect is? Just by posting it, I am confronting some fear I have, and then being like, okay, here's what I'm afraid is going to happen. Now let's do an actual experiment and see what actually happens.
Right.
And it's usually not the end of the world, like I think.
This reminds me of I did a tweet something like, the best way to kill your fantasies is to actually do it, you
Ooh,
know?
right.
And it's the same with
Interesting.
fears. Fears are just fantasies, you
It's
know?
just unpleasant fantasies.
They're unpleasant fantasies. Fears are just unpleasant fantasies.
So true.
So the way to kill any fantasy, pleasant or not, is to actually do it. And then it can't remain a fantasy. Then
Yeah.
it's an actual experience instead.
Interesting.
And it usually never turns out the way you thought it would, either positive or negative, right? Like, your
Yeah.
fears aren't as bad as you thought they were, and your fantasies aren't as good as you thought they were. But the RVing was great though.
Yeah.
But it was so real. See, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
it becomes real. Like,
I mean, she could have
Yeah.
spent her entire life being like,
Yep.
someday I'm gonna buy an RV and like travel around the country, and it's gonna be the best thing ever. You know, I'm gonna do it for the rest of my life. And,
Yeah.
like she could have spent her entire life doing that, and I think a lot of people do that, like waiting for retirement or waiting for who knows what, and then they try it and they find out like, oh, this wasn't what I expected. And it's like she said, like the RV thing wasn't bad, but it's like after a year of doing it, like like we know what it's like, we've experienced it. And it's like you got out of your system in a certain sense, right?
You guys won the O'Shaughnessy Fellowship recently, so
Mhm.
congratulations. You made a
Yeah,
solid application video. Again, I've lost count as to how many times I watched it. For those for those listening um, who might not be familiar with the fellowship, could you either of you describe what the O'Shaughnessy Fellowship is, and also what are you going to do now that you won?
sure.
We're looking at each other,
Yeah.
expecting the other person to explain it. Why don't you
Yeah,
explain it since you're the one who found it? He's the one who
right,
found
right.
it.
So I've been following Jim O'Shaughnessy for about 3 years. I've he has a great Twitter presence. He posts like really interesting threads. He's posted I've gone to some of the salons he's hosted over the years.
And lots of gifts.
Oh yeah,
He uses gifts
he
all the
has.
time.
I learned a lot of my Twitter reply game from watching him.
Okay.
Mhm.
So it's a really interesting guy. He was the founder of O'Shaughnessy Asset Management, which was a big like financial company in New York. Um, but then recently he started O'Shaughnessy Ventures, which is more of kind of an experimental kind of. I mean, part of it's going to be like venture capital, like investing. Like he's invested in Stability AI, which is super exciting. But he wanted to do a fellowship for like 12 people over like the course of a year, where he would basically give them $100,000 to do whatever they wanted to, without any kind of like no equity or anything. So super, unusual, super generous. And I heard about this at the beginning of the year, and I was like, I mean, I at that point Martha was working full time doing software engineering. I was like a stay at home dad. Um, but it was like we've always wanted to be able to like work together on stuff, and it seemed like this was like might be an opportunity to do that. I mean, it was very very far unlikely. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, that was the reasoning behind that. And like, but he, like he's giving out two of these fellowships now, but like it's going to go towards. I think the other guy is like a quantum scientist, right? So it's like science, art, business, but
Sorts of things.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, it's a awesome
Mhm.
idea.
Yep. And we came up with a pitch. It's funny because before we even knew about this, I was having a conversation with my oldest daughter. She's 10, and she asked me, "Mom, what would you do if you didn't have to worry about money? If we just had all the money we needed and you didn't have to work?"
Mm-hmm.
Which is it's one of those standard questions you ask people to find out what they want to do for real. I thought about it. I said, I'd make I'd make movies. Like you know, and you can kind of tell because I have my own YouTube channel, and I've been making little videos here and there just when I have the time or I'm inspired. But I'd love to do more. Um and that makes sense. Like, it's what I've always wanted to do apparently, and it's what brought us together. And um so we came up with this pitch about well, we had to come up with a pitch that was like, what kind of movies did we want to make, right? Because and something that we've thought a lot about, especially with our own kids, is education and what kind of education works for us. Um, and we've come across some things in our own explorations that we think could help a lot of other people
Right.
if we got the word out a little bit more. So that's where our video came in. Was we talked about making videos about alternative education, specifically like self-directed education. Um, and so that's what we've been focusing on lately. But it's so open-ended that it's really not limited to that,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. So like, when we met with Jim, like I kept trying to like, or even before we applied, like I think he hosted a Twitter space, and like one of the question I had was like, okay, Jim, at the end of this year, like what kind of deliverables are you looking for here? Like, I mean, there's no way you're just going to give someone $100,000 and say go for it, right? I mean, what's the ulterior motive, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, he was like, no, like I mean, his mind, like it doesn't, there doesn't have
Mhm.
to be some sort of like, you know, finished business plan or like some sort of revenue generating
Yeah.
whatever. And so that was very encouraging too, because it's like we wanted to make movies, but it's like
Mhm.
the idea like trying to make a living or like make movies in a way that like generates income is very hard,
Yes,
very
unless
very
you
hard.
wanna do
I mean, there's a few
yeah.
YouTubers that like can do it, and like like they've built up a massive audience, and like that's amazing. Our
Yeah.
YouTube channel, like I think it had like 1,000 subscribers or something. Like, so it's
Mhm.
like there's no way it's gonna make money.
Mhm.
So anyways, I mean that was good to like actually push in, because
Yeah.
like I said, like who does this, right? Who just gives away $100,000 and say, hey, just go do something that's no one's ever done before,
Mhm.
right? Just go play.
So it's almost like, I mean, he's looking more for people than ideas almost,
Oh,
you
I
know?
suppose, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so he's investing in people what more than their actual ideas, maybe. Um, so but we said basically what we've been doing for our kids, which is like giving them the freedom and the space and the resources to pursue their interests and to learn and to do what they want.
Yeah.
He's basically trying to do that for adults, adults who may never have had that opportunity or are
Right.
basically
Exactly.
stuck in the grind of daily life just trying to get by, and don't have the opportunity to pursue these ideas they have.
Yeah. So I think that's one thing I've always liked about Jim. It's like even from like on Twitter, it comes through across, but he's one of the most optimistic people I've ever met. Like I mean, in terms of like personal stuff, but also like just like in terms of like civilization and the world,
Yeah,
and it's pretty cool. I mean,
Mhm.
it's cool it's contagious to be around people like that.
right. So, education, that's something that's really close to my heart. I'm 16 and
Mm.
I go to school, a conventional high school, which kind of sucks. So, I'm trying to drop out, uh, kinda. So, instead of entirely dropping out, I'll be, um, so this is not final again, but this is something that I've been thinking about having, you know, emotional discussions with my parents about. So, uh, what I'll do is not go to school, so not waste like 40 hours a week of my time,
Mhm.
and instead just stay at home, study a bit. Otherwise, I'm always learning. I'm all for learning, but studying for school is like different. It's something I'm forced to do, so I'm not really interested in it.
Right.
And so what I'll do there is, study a bit, then pass the exams in the end. So I'll just go to school for the exams and then get the grades, satisfy my parents or whatever. But
Mm.
I'm curious how y'all are currently raising your 5 children, educating them. Do you unschool, homeschool? What's the difference?
Yeah, we've been unschooling. It's funny because I'm currently making a video about our story, so stay tuned. But before we say that, there's this book that I've never read but was recommended to me called The Teenage Liberation Handbook: How to Quit School and Get a Real Life and Education. so
Yeah.
so
Okay.
that's I sounds like a very dangerous book to read, but probably would help a lot of teenagers, and possibly
Yeah.
upset a lot of parents. Um,
So yeah, basically our understanding of, or I mean, the way we're trying to raise our kids is with this kind of this understanding that kids have a intrinsic drive to learn.
mhm,
Like nobody teaches a kid how to talk, nobody teaches a kid how to walk. Like they're all basic things. Um, and it always reminds me of, I think it's Nassim Taleb. He had this whole thing about teaching birds to fly, He's like, you could have a Harvard professor sit down, like do this lecture for like, weeks of these baby birds and like showing them like aerodynamics and like teaching them physics and then at the end of the semester, the birds are flying, and the professor's like, oh, I am a great professor. I have taught the birds. I have taught the birds how to fly.
Uh-huh.
And that's kind of our approach to like the kids. It's just like the things that we have done in our lives have almost always been things that we have learned on our own, and that
Right.
we had some sort of intrinsic motivation to learn. And so much of what we learned in school is basically forgotten after the tests, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
it's so sad. It's just like,
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of educators, psychologists, etc., who you can read, who've talked about this idea that humans are intrinsically wired to be curious and to learn,
yeah. But
and can intuitively know what they need to learn to survive just by observing around them, and that forced learning or compulsory education can actually kill that, because the kids you might want to learn one thing, but the teacher says, nope, can't learn that right now. We're learning this instead, so, but we found as adults that the when you're really, really interested in something, you will learn it really quickly and really well, and you'll remember it.
yeah, and that's basically what sounds like what you're doing. And I from what you're saying, I assume it's going to work perfectly. But it's like what you actually need to know to pass your exams can be learned in such a smaller amount of time than what school will force you to like put into it, right?
Right.
And this is what like we've heard tons of stories of like people that a lot of people that would grew up unschooling and they didn't have like a lot of math or different things, and
Yeah, they wanted to go to
they're
college.
trying to get into college, and
Yep.
and it's like they just took like what, a month or two
To learn the math they
get
needed.
caught up like all I mean
Fine.
basically like to college level math because they were motivated.
Yeah, instead of
motivated.
suffering through years and years learning something they're not interested in, they just took a couple months.
So anyways, but this is all theory. This is all
Yeah,
theory.
yeah.
And like to be perfectly honest, we don't know how our kids are going to turn out, right? I mean, this
Right.
is the other thing. Like if we had them in a normal school, there would be a certain amount of psychological safety, or like that we would feel like, okay, we're doing what everyone else is doing. We have professionals teaching them. We have professionals measuring their progress. Therefore, our kids are probably going to turn out okay and have jobs and make money and survive.
Yeah.
And it's like I don't blame anyone for doing that. Like what we're doing, basically like homeschooling in a way that is basically unschooling, which means that we don't have any curriculum. We don't have any okay, by this age you need to learn this. By this age you need to do this. Like we are
like our 7-year-old knows how to read better than our 9-year-old because she's more interested.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Nice.
That's just fine. Like he's been doing just fine without reading. But it's like the RV life. We didn't know how that was going to turn out either.
Right.
It could have been a total disaster.
Yeah, and it almost was. Like we almost died a couple times doing the RV, like literally.
Well, carbon monoxide poisoning is
At
no
least-
joke. Let's put it that way.
Yes, that was the one time. Like anyways, like the bedroom Martha and I had, we had this whole thing. We were at this like truck stop. We had the window open, the engine was running, and like that was
It was bad.
The kids were safe, but
kids were fine.
But Martha and I almost died. And it's one of those things where it's like if we had died, or someone had got hurt, right? It would be so easy for someone from the outside to be like, "Oh, look at that! That they shouldn't have done that. They should have just done the normal thing." But it's like the problem with doing just the normal thing is that terrible things happen to those people too, right?
This is really interesting because before we did the RV thing, I had this strange sense of like, I mean, we were kind of settled into life and getting into a routine, and I had this strange like almost survival instinct saying, we have got to get out of here or we're gonna die. Like we can't become complacent like this. It was bad for our survival.
It was too comfortable.
It was too comfortable. And in a certain sense, it's like And when we did the RV thing, it was like forcing ourselves to be in a more survival situation. Like, and we felt alive, you know? We felt more alive and more fulfilled and happy in a certain sense because we were in more of a survival situation. And I think a lot of people, I mean, people go out on crazy camping trips and crazy, I mean, we see people doing this in different ways, like trying to break out of the comfortable life somehow. Um, yeah, what, uh, why does it trigger like this danger sense in me if we
Yeah.
get too
Okay, or
comfortable?
it's just like your parents, right? Like the idea of you quitting school to your parents,
Mm,
I'm sure is scary, right? Would you say like that's the
Yeah,
emotion,
totally.
like fear,
Yeah.
mm,
fear, and that's I guess that's the other thing too is it's like in our life in general, we're trying not to make decisions based on fear,
mhm.
like just kind of as a
Yes.
heuristic, right? As a heuristic, it's just like, and I've almost done the opposite where I've found things I'm afraid of that I'm still kind of attracted to, and I've
Mhm,
intentionally done them
mhm.
partly because I was afraid.
Follow the fear. That's been kind of my mantra this year. I was just
Oh,
realizing
yeah,
that the things that I desire the most are also the things that scare me the most.
interesting.
And so instead of saying follow your desires, I'm saying follow the fear. Like, because the fear is probably where your desires are anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Martha actually she dropped out of high school, right?
Nice.
Or
Middle school, actually, yeah, and and high school for different reasons.
yeah,
In middle school, I asked my parents if I could homeschool because the kids were mean. But then I went back for high school, and it's the same thing you experienced. Like, it's so much wasted time. It's just like I could learn this stuff faster just on my own, and then I'd have more time to do what I was interested in. Um, so yeah, for high school, it was the same thing. I homeschooled for the academic parts, but so I identify, and it works out. It's just fine. It's good.
and I guess
Totally.
that's the thing. Like like I identify with your parents too because it's like I mean as a parent or especially as a parent, but just even anyone, we want to have like these measurable like these metrics that we can
Hmm.
basically judge whether or not we're doing okay in life,
Yeah.
right? I mean, like whether it's your how you like the school or the kids' grades, but I think for adults it's like your salary. Like you look at
Hmm.
your salary and like okay, is my salary comparable with
Your retirement, your
my
retirement fund.
peers? Like how do I measure up? Where am I?
Mhm.
Um, and once again, like on the one hand, it's like I don't blame anyone for doing that. On the other hand, I've also realized even though like it seems rational to do that, it's not necessarily the smartest thing. Like even though like all the like yeah, it's not even necessarily the smartest. It's just
Okay.
just to follow what everyone else is doing. I don't know.
Mm-mm. Well, especially if other people are not the happiest either.
Oh right,
I
well that
mean,
yeah exactly
that's
right
another thing. It's
yeah
like they might be safe, or they might feel secure, more secure, but they're
they're
how
miserable.
many happy people do you know? And are they the
Yeah.
ones doing crazy things, or are
Well,
they the
here's the
ones
thing:
doing normal things?
the safest thing to do in the world is to stay at home and complain.
Which is most people.
It's incredibly safe. You're like you're
We decided a long time ago we were not gonna to basically give up complaining,
mm,
because complaining is what people who have no agency do. Complaining is what people do if they're totally helpless victims and they can't take action.
no, if they feel like helpless victims,
If they feel like
and if
helpless
they
victims,
want to be, I
yes.
mean, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Nobody the hell. I mean,
So the first thing we did, we were living in North Dakota, which is like the coldest place in the United States. It's cold. It's bad. It's like the Arctic. No, it's not like the Arctic, but it's
it's
like
worse.
yeah, it's worse because you actually live there. Um,
No,
um, and we decided we can either stop complaining about the cold and just decide intentionally to stay here with the cold included, or we can decide to leave. But either way, we were not going to complain anymore, you know? So it's just, if you give up complaining, it means you have to be so much more intentional with your life and realize that you are responsible for your own life and your own situation and your own choices so that you really can't complain, you know? You're not allowed to complain unless you're going to do something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I do think complaining is mostly useless. Like, I see a lot of people complain about education, the education system.
Oh, right.
And,
Exactly. Yeah. Me too.
and not just education, like, as you said, people just complaining about stuff in general, expecting some high authority to come fix their problems for them. But you guys are different. You realize school is messed up, that your kids shouldn't have such a messed up environment to go to against their will, and so you do something about it, which is really cool. And so I appreciate that. Couple things that you said earlier. So it's ironic that you're trying to force someone, like, you're teaching them how to learn, but that's like actually diminishing their curiosity, their own creativity, and so that's having a hampering effect on the learning. And so instead of teaching aerodynamics to the birds, just let them fly, right? So that's one. And yeah, so you're talking about, so some people, like, when they hear homeschool or unschool, they're like, oh, these kids are going to have gaps in their knowledge. But that's not true. Like, and that you brought up that kids learning high level maths in just a month. So if you're interested in a particular problem that you want to solve, and problems, I see problems as awesome things. They're like interesting to solve and stuff. And so when you have a particular problem you want to solve, you want to learn something, and you see this barrier that you didn't really learn before, because if you're on school journey and you just followed your interests, and so you have to go through, let's say, this math thing to solve this problem. And so even if you've had these so-called gaps in your learning, you're gonna want to learn math now, because that's what's going to enable you to solve your interesting problem. And then so you do that mostly faster than the other kids, and because you're more interested really paying attention and stuff on your own, and then you do that, you go ahead, solve your problem. So that's obviously way better.
And that also, if there is a gap in your knowledge, is probably just because you never needed it before.
Right.
I mean, that's the idea. In-demand learning as opposed to just-in-case learning. Because with just-in-case learning, like, who decides? I mean, there's so much knowledge in the world, so many things you can learn.
I mean, this is the other thing too. This is
necessary.
This is the other question. I mean, this is one of the biggest complaints about like Chat GPT that I've seen from like normal people that aren't really like on Twitter is, what about the teachers?
Yeah, kids are going to use it to cheat.
Kids are going to cheat with this, or they're not going to learn. But so that's the question. Is like, are you more concerned about the teachers or the kids, right? And what AI in my mind is doing, it's like calculators, right? It's like before calculators, if you wanted to do math, you had to be like super disciplined and like have all the stuff in your mind and like study super hard. But then with a calculator, it was like you were able to do that. Like anyone could do it, advanced math. And that's what I see like AI doing. It's just like, who gives a crap if you have a gap in your knowledge? Or even Google. Like, what the heck? If you have a gap in your knowledge,
like that.
Go watch a YouTube video. Like, I mean,
it's not a big deal.
YouTube is awesome. Yeah, YouTube for education.
Martha taught herself to code in less than a year.
Using just online
stuff.
Yeah,
using like free code camp, using YouTube, totally free. And then she got
ChatGPT would have made it so much better too. I'm just pointing that out. That would have been amazing.
Yeah, but and then she got a job. She got a job on Twitter. Like, and then she was talking about her stuff she was doing on Twitter, and that's where her first job offer came from. And it's like, anyways.
That's another thing we're doing with our own kids is we're letting them use all the same technologies we're using. Like, exactly. We're treating them like little adults, just like we're treating ourselves like big kids, basically. Yeah,
and I think this is part of the problem too. Like with like homeschooling, like normal homeschooling or like school, is that you take the kids and you put them in this artificial little. Like, do you do coding at all?
I don't, not really.
Okay, but so in coding, there's something called like the dev environment, which is basically like the live environment, except it's like not connected to the. I mean, it's like a separate little environment,
Mhm.
and that's like what the kids are in. They're like they don't have access to the APIs. They don't have access to like like the real world
Mhm.
that adults do.
Most kids are in like
Um,
a tiny artificial world that adults have made for them.
right,
Yeah.
and so like they have to try to like make it kind of like as realistic as possible. And in our opinion is like no, our kids want to play with. They want phones. They want
Mhm.
laptops. They want. I mean, they want tools. Like they want the act. Like
Yeah.
they want the tools that we're using.
And another thing people bring up with homeschooling is like the socialization thing. Like
Oh
how are they
right.
going to be socialized? But it's the same thing. It's like, do you want people to be socialized in this artificial environment where they're only allowed to interact with people their same age and only under one like a teacher's supervision and all I mean that is not real world socialization at all. Whereas most homeschoolers, I mean, I can tell when I go to a playground which kids are homeschooled and which kids are public schooled
Hmm.
because I will go up and talk to them like they're real people, and the ones that go to public school will just like look away like why is this person talking to me, because their only interaction with adults is as authorities.
Hmm.
Like the only time an adult will talk to them just one on one is if they're in trouble, you know? Versus homeschool kids, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, blah blah blah," and they'll just chat your ear. I mean, they might be a little shy maybe, but they'll still like smile and respond, depending on how outgoing they are. But yeah, I can. It's not hard to spot a public school kid, and it's so sad because I'm just talking to them like a normal person, and they're not used to that. They should be used to that. Treat them like people, you know? Anyway, I'm
Yeah,
I'm ranting.
I
You're
know.
supposed to stop
Yeah,
me from
we gotta
ranting.
stop ranting. Okay, ask us another question.
Yeah. Have you all heard about taking children seriously, like the philosophy thing, the formal philosophy?
Yeah, that's I think
Mm.
was it what's her name? Louis something Louis Metal or
Lily Tanit, yeah.
Luli. Yeah, I mean that's how she was raised, right? I think she's talked about that.
Right.
But I'm not super familiar with it. Like what how does it can you sum it up?
Yeah, so it's a non-paternalistic, non-authoritarian, very liberal view of children. Again, when you go about telling adults what to do, it almost always spoils the relationship. And so, why should you assume that you can go about telling a child what to do without hurting that relationship? So
Mhm.
it it
I
stems
mean,
from like Karl Popper's epistemology, which David Deutsch improves upon in his books Fabric of Reality, Beginning of Infinity. And it's really like, the way we treat our children literally has implications for the universe. And taking them seriously is really important. So, um, kind of, again, thinking of them as people and not these kids that you just need to tell what to do and they'll do. And they have a mind of their own. And so you don't have to just force them to do things. So I think it'd be really cool for you guys to kind of check that out because
yeah. Well, it
rings.
sounds like yeah, we definitely would resonate with that. Or
Yeah,
I mean just yeah.
it sounds like something we started trying out a while ago. That was like 5 years ago or something,
Mm,
where where we came to this realization that the kids were starting to
mm,
treat us like enemies instead of allies.
yeah.
Like be sneaky. They'd be like sneaking
Yeah,
stuff from the
well, we'd have like
kitchen and
rules
eating
about
it,
the
or
food or
you
like we
know.
had all these rules.
And Nat pointed out, he's like, "Do we? I mean, why can't the kids eat food when they want? Like, don't we want them to be more independent? Do we really just want to control when and what they eat all the time and have to feed them?" And so so we started shifting and being like, and even realizing like the way we talk to the kids, would we ever talk to each other that way? Like why are we treating them so disrespectfully, basically? Like we would never talk to each other that way. Um, but yeah, it's the same thing. And I mean, so many people complain about teenagers because they're, you know,
Yeah.
teenagers so rough, because they have an attitude or whatever. Well, teenagers are pretty much adults, like
Yeah.
physically and mentally. And I mean, you're you're adults, and you're still being treated like a little
Yeah, or
child.
just like you. Like I had no idea you were 16.
Me
Like
neither.
like
I
this
think
is
I'm like 20, 30, who knows
I mean,
what? Like, who
this
cares?
is exactly what we're talking about. Like here you are, like doing these podcasts with people complete, like 100% professional, probably more professional than a lot of adults. You're making, you're doing, sending invites. Doing, I mean, you are living in the adult world,
Mhm.
like as because you're interested, apparently, right? I mean, it's just like that's it's just, of course teenagers are gonna act like rebellious whatever if they're being treated like toddlers. It's like
Right.
what?
Now, here's a question for you is where did you get the idea of leaving high school
Oh
and doing these podcasts and things? Because apparently it didn't come from your parents, right?
yeah, yeah. What's it? Tell us your story. We're more
Sure.
interested.
Well, before lockdown, before COVID, I was pretty much a normal kid. I'd go to school, and uh, because I was in this environment where I was just constantly being fed these same ideas that you need to do this, you need to pass. It's just a certain environment around me, certain ideas flowing. So, your worldview is just molded by those ideas in front of you.
Mhm.
And so I never really questioned authority. I was just doing stuff, doing my exams very well. And I don't know, just doing what I was told. And
Mhm.
when COVID hit, you know, I stepped back from that environment because I wasn't being exposed to the same groups of people over there at school because everything was work from home thing. And that's when I started reading, just picked up on books for the first time in my life and started
Mhm.
reading a lot. And I met this one friend, and we would eventually have like 2-3 hour long conversations a day sometimes. We were in the same building, so we could meet and stuff. But we would just talk about stuff, and he brought up entrepreneurship to me, which was completely mind blowing because I never thought that you could do your own thing. I thought you just had to go and work for someone else, but apparently you can start your own company. You can do all these crazy things, and so that friend was yeah, that was really an eye opener. But that was just the spark, the beginning, and then I obviously read a lot of books. Then I started a blog, started engaging on Twitter, and that's led to pretty much the best opportunities in my life, and just following what interests me from there. It's totally been awesome. So that's kind of my journey.
That's
Hmm.
amazing. Love it. Yeah, yeah, entrepreneurship.
Well, I
That's
think that's, I mean, that's part of the problem though, with like even like talking about unschooling or all this stuff is like because we don't really believe in top-down approaches, like it's hard, like how how do you even get it out there, right? Or how do you even like even like our story, like how like if we wrote a book like, here's how to do exactly what we did, it's not going to work.
mhm.
Like our story is so weird and bizarre, and like or even like winning this fellowship, right? Like I mean,
There's
like
no
like
there's no book we can write
we
about how
never,
to win this
it's not like, oh
fellowship.
yeah, we worked hard for 10 years because we knew in 2023 Jim O'Shaughnessy would be giving out these fellowships and that we would have a good chance of winning it. It's I mean we never even thought about doing this until it was like a presented to us, right?
We were just doing stuff.
We were just doing
It was
stuff,
just
and like you
easy.
said,
It was
like
just good stuff.
following your interests, right? Like that's not a like that's the opposite of a curriculum. A
Mhm.
curriculum is you're following somebody else's interests, basically, like following their blueprint of what of how they see like a successful person acting and looking and whatever.
Mhm. Yep.
So
And it depends. You need a goal if you have a curriculum too. I mean, and like you said, like if the goal is to get a job, then it's probably okay. You learn the things you need to learn, you get a college degree, and you get the job that you was your goal to get, right? But
yeah, and most people do that are miserable. Then
yeah, most people end up doing
yeah.
that and getting a job and realizing that, uh-oh, I'm not happy. Now what? This is my goal for many years and I've achieved it
Yeah.
and it's
So
not
so
good.
that's like when I think about our kids, it's like I've talked about this before, but it's like my idea of like I want to keep my vision of what success means for them
Mhm,
as fluid as possible.
mhm,
Like, I mean, if you push me, I would probably give you like a vision of like how I want my kids to turn out, right?
mm,
But but I am trying as hard as I can to like hold that very loosely
Mm.
because who knows what the world's gonna even look like when they're adults? Who knows? I mean, it's just like my
so
parents could
true.
never have predicted what we're doing right now. Or like, I mean, or Martha's mom is a software engineer,
Mhm,
and she went to back in the 80s, right? Or 90s, 80s. She went back to school and like got a software like
Oh, the
master.
90s.
She got a
Yeah.
master's in software engineering, and she worked as a developer for years.
Mhm.
She would never have imagined that her daughter would do the same thing for free,
Learn how to, yeah.
using this thing called the internet, right?
Yeah. And my mom, she didn't even learn how to code. She got a computer science
Right,
degree, and then
right,
everything else she had to learn on the job,
right.
you know?
So
She didn't even learn how to code.
oh my gosh, right. So even back then, education wasn't able to keep up
No,
with
no,
the rate of progress.
no way. No.
So
Yeah. So
so
interesting.
I don't know. I mean, like I said, like with your parents, I probably won't help talking to your parents, but it's just like if they could see how quickly the world is changing, and basically be like, oh my gosh, like that's how I see like my kids. Like I want my kids to be so adaptable and so flexible, and have such a high degree of agency
Yeah.
that if they're like,
They'll be able to learn what
yeah.
they need to learn. They'll be able to take opportunities when they see them. They'll be able to know what they want and
Right.
how to work towards it.
Right.
Like I mean, how many kids just don't even think about what they actually want? You know, they just are following the system.
Until you had time, like sounded like during the pandemic, right? You actually had time to start like thinking and learn, like reading stuff that you were interested in.
I think it was actually important, you know, that I wasn't exposed to just that curriculum, that environment where I'm just being fed all these ideas, and it's just implicit or sometimes even explicit that you're not allowed to question the teacher. So
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Can't
just
even
dumb.
ask questions.
Right. I mean,
Right.
how bizarre is that? Where it's
Yeah.
like kids are supposed to have the answers. Like the teacher asks the question and the kid is supposed to have the answer.
Right.
Whereas you want the kid to be asking the questions.
Yeah.
Like our kids ask us questions all the time.
Yeah. And they're stumpers too.
Right.
And
that's the thing.
Video about that.
And that is why adults squash it, I think, is
because
because
they don't know the answers.
Because they're trying to, fulfill this authority role, right?
Hmm.
And if you're the authority figure, you're supposed to have the answers. So I mean, it's a weird, yeah. I mean, it's like we basically had. It's been very.
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes I think there was another tweet I saw that was like, imagine a world where there was no such thing as talking back, right? I mean, kids, they're seen as talking back if they ask questions or if they ask why or whatever. But they're just asking, I mean, but it's seen as talking back because they're just not blindly following whatever you say as the ultimate authority. So a lot of times, like I say, hey, let's do this, or time to. Here's an example: time to get your pajamas on, right? And they're like, why do we need to wear pajamas? I'm like, that is an excellent question, and I really don't have a good answer. Why don't we just try not wearing pajamas and see what happens? Like maybe we'll figure, if we don't wear pajamas, maybe we'll find out why people wear pajamas. I don't know. Maybe it's just because your clothes are like supposed to be dirty and you'll get your bed dirty or something. But anyway, I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, like we've let our kids dress themselves since they were like 3 or 4. So like we'll take them outside, out in public, and they'll have like their shirt on inside out. And it's like, it's humiliating. It's like, it is so humiliating to me.
I'm proud. Like my children dress themselves just inside out and backwards and dirty, but they did it themselves.
Yeah, like I'm so embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed. But it's just like, I've had to ask myself, like, okay, what's more important to me? My kids learning how to dress themselves, or me doing it all for them, hating it, resenting it, just so that I can feel like I'm getting the approval of strangers.
So you can look like a good parent. Would you rather be a good parent or look like a good parent? How about that?
Exactly. And it's just like, and then when I phrase it that way, it's like, oh right, yeah, of course I want my kids to, like, right. I mean that's more important.
And when we were RVing, they don't have chores. Our kids don't have chores. They have jobs. Like they ask for a job, and we're like, okay, well, how about putting the dishes away, or different things, and we pay them like $1 for different things. And when we were RVing, when we'd stop at a gas station or something, they were so proud. They would take their wallets, they'd like dump their money all over the floor to like
Right.
to like
The
count
floor
it
of
out.
the gas. They'd go in the gas. Oh, it's terrible. They would go in the gas station.
Dump it
They
out.
would wait.
Like, oh,
They
okay,
would wait
this
in
and
line.
this and this.
There'd be like 5 people waiting behind them, and they would dump their wallets out on the floor and count out their little quarters and things, so they could pay for their candy or something.
Yep, and they were so proud.
Oh,
And
so embarrassing.
they
Oh my
never
gosh.
begged us. They never asked us to buy them anything because they were so proud to be using their own money to buy stuff. Talk about entrepreneurship, right? Like they were, or our son is the entrepreneur. Our, different kids are different, right? Like our oldest is much better with like a regular job type thing, but our son is very much an entrepreneur. He did his lemonade stand. He did a lemonade stand by himself. One day I was like, wait, where is he? And it turns out he had drawn all these pictures and he was going door to door in our neighborhood trying to sell his pictures that he had drawn. So Nat ended up going with him because we didn't want to get in trouble and be like, what's this child doing? But just the initiative, like he's going to go out and sell his pictures.
Yeah, but like, once again, like I sympathize with other parents because him doing that was uncomfortable for me.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, and not just uncomfortable, but like the cops could have showed up. I mean, he had the cop show up, like, or at
Right.
least one
Yeah.
time. Thankfully, it's never been like serious, but it's like, anyways,
They showed up because the two youngest
were-
were playing in a puddle at the
Yeah.
bottom of our driveway.
oh right, yeah.
And
And one of our neighbors,
I knew that they knew not to go into the street,
right,
right?
yep,
Like our kids never go into the street because they learned, and I trust them. But our neighbor walking by saw these two little girls playing in a puddle at the bottom of our driveway and thought, oh no, negligent parents, right? Called the cops. So it's okay because with other kids, it might have been dangerous,
exactly, yeah, right.
because I have seen kids run into the street like right in front of me chasing a ball or something. I know that our kids wouldn't do that, but some kids do. So how was she to know?
Yeah.
So that would be one nice thing about living in the country. Anyway.
Switching gears, you both have been really engaging on Twitter and other social media platforms. And, firstly, it's just so cool that we can do that. I DM'd Nat if he'd be interested in doing the podcast. He was like, yeah, let's do it. I'll just send you our Calendly. And so we set it up, and here we are, strangers from across oceans having a civil conversation. And that really amazes me about human ingenuity and makes me hopeful, even during a time where every second tweet on my feed is from an AGI doomer.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to ask how, you've taken advantage of these social media platforms, and if you have any thoughts on how others could do the same.
Yeah. So the frame we like is heuristics, kind of like rules of thumb, like that's the kind of learning that we've that's been most helpful to us. So what are some social media heuristics?
Well,
what do you think?
First of all, the story, I mean, he got me into social media. I was not into social media at all, but I was learning how to code. And he said, you got to get on social media so that you can learn in public. Because how else was anyone going to know who I was or what I could do? So that was my approach when I was learning to code, was basically just posting about what I was learning, what I was doing, LinkedIn and Twitter.
Yep.
And it worked because that's where I got my first job and every job afterwards, basically.
But actually your first, it wasn't a job, but her first like gig was from LinkedIn, actually.
Was LinkedIn.
It was a guy, it was an entrepreneur in England who was making a React Native app for, mobile. And Martha had just posted, hey, I'm learning React Native. And he was like, oh, hey, you wanna get like, how much do you pay? Like $6,000 or?
Something. No, it was less than that. I don't remember.
But it's like, I mean, so it wasn't like a full-time thing, but it's like she was basically being paid to learn.
Right.
Like she was already learning. She was already learning this, and then suddenly, because she was posting it publicly, she got this. Once again, you would never be able to count on this. You could never write a book about this.
Right. And I suppose in terms of heuristics, I I think one reason people reacted so positively to me and followed me is because, I mean, they keep saying how authentic and inspiring I am, you know? Um, people are smart and they know when they're getting sold to or manipulated,
Right. Yeah.
right?
That's,
They just
oh
know.
my gosh.
And I was just sharing my journey, sharing what I was learning, sharing my reactions to things. And I was not looking to like get a bunch of followers so I could sell them a bunch of courses and
Oh yeah.
stuff like
Yeah.
that, which is what a lot of people are playing. I just basically wanted to get myself out there and hope someone would find me and want to hire me. And in the meantime, I also wanted to, by sharing my own journey, this is the power of storytelling, right? By sharing my own journey, I was hoping that others like me might also be encouraged just by my story,
Yeah. And they were like you.
And they were.
Oh, and
yeah.
YouTube too. So she was doing
Oh, yeah,
LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. I got started mostly on LinkedIn. I ended up just like I wrote a JavaScript script to like send to spam connection requests. So I have like 15,000, 17,000 followers on LinkedIn.
I didn't cheat, so but I think we're about the same.
Some of them were
I
organic.
did it the organic way.
A lot of them were organic. But what I found on LinkedIn, I mean, I got a ton of engagement on LinkedIn and stuff, but I never got any kind of like actual job leads. So I kind of gave up on LinkedIn. It was kind of, well, what happened? Okay, so here's the thing with Twitter. I kept hearing this rumor that like, oh, Twitter is actually better for networking. So after I learned to code in 2018, before Martha did, I got a Twitter account and started kind of like networking, and that's how I got exposed to a lot of people like Naval, yeah, just a lot of that like entrepreneurial kind of world and software development, of course. And what I found is that people were actually having conversations on Twitter and like developing like kind of these casual relationships. And there was this one quote, I think it was like in The Black Swan or one of those books, where he says like the best advice I could possibly give a young person starting out, like your age or a little older, is to go to a super like vibrant happening city and attend as many parties as you possibly can.
And Twitter's the party, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I was so like part of it though, like was like I moved to Atlanta to learn how to code, and I attended tons of meetups. I networked my ass off, and I got actually a couple gigs from that. But what I realized was Twitter was like this international party that never stopped. It just like
Right.
it was going, and the people at the party were the most interesting, like agentic, like like the people that were actually doing things were on Twitter. Like LinkedIn was just people that were like kind of doing this performance of like I wanna just a normal corporate job, and like here's my professional kind of like persona.
Well, and also I was disappointed when I found out basically LinkedIn is people looking for jobs and recruiters.
Oh right, yeah,
and those are not the people I was trying to find.
Terrible luck with recruiters.
Terrible luck with recruiters.
It's just like no.
Yep.
If you want a job, go cut out the middle guy.
Go to Twitter.
Right, go to Twitter because that's where the people that actually make decisions are. Like there will always be these basically finding the places like the parties, right? Like where are the? I think the reason parties work as opposed to like even like meetups and stuff is because. Okay, well, here's the thing with like LinkedIn or even on Twitter, right? But like the whole hustle culture is really limiting because basically what it is, it's like here, here's a course for $20. Buy my course. You can learn how to do software development, and then you can sell courses. It's transactional, right? It's playing the short game. And I think this was a Naval quote, like, so early on, like he was very influential, like a lot of his tweets, like really kind of helped me frame like what I was doing, like with Twitter. And one of his tweets was play long-term games with long-term people. And that really resonated. Partly, I mean, it was like, yes, like, that's what I want to do. It's like, I don't want to like get an audience, get as much money from them as I can, and then leave town, right? And that at a party, I think that's what happens. Like if you go to a party and someone's like pitching you on something or trying to get some money from you, or like you're not going to talk to them like that. That's a terrible interaction, right? That's just what I mean. Nobody wants to go to a party like that. But what happens at parties is that you can like if you interact enough times, like you build up like a certain level of trust and just like knowledge of like where the other person is.
Mm.
Um, does that make sense? I mean, that's because it's like, anyways, and that's what I see like happening on Twitter. It's just like whenever I meet a new person, whenever I'm interacting with someone, I always keep open the possibility that I could be interacting with them 10 years from now.
Hmm.
And not just interacting, but act like
Right.
intricately involved or who knows what. It's like it's not
Right.
even
And
money.
that,
It's
and
like
that's
even just as a friend. Like
and that's one
it'd be
reason
fun.
why we don't have a lot of hopes of actually having an income through like YouTube or Twitch or different things because
Oh, right.
you
Yep.
have to do that hustling thing,
Yes.
and
I
neither of
know.
us are interested.
We don't like it. It's not fun.
I at one point on LinkedIn I was kind of like a micro influencer, and a few companies came to me to like advertise for them, and I'm just like, you know what? If you want me to like use your product and then give my real reaction to it, I'd be okay with that. But if you're telling me what to say, I'm not okay with that. Because it's like a betrayal. Like everyone's following me because I'm authentic, right?
Mm.
So there goes all my followers. Like I'm betraying them. I'm not being myself anymore, which I don't know. And that's the thing is that we probably could figure out how to make money on YouTube because we're smart and we're whatever,
Yeah.
but we're just not interested in that game. We're just not interested in selling. I mean, obviously, we're selling these ideas of alternative education, but we're not actually selling it.
Yeah,
We're just kind of
not really. I mean,
no,
we're
we're
not
not.
making money.
We're
off it.
sharing our story. We're sharing what we've looked into and our experience. But yeah, we're not making money from that. Let's put it that way. We're just being given money for whatever right now.
Yeah,
So
it's a huge difference. And it's like I have friends on Twitter that seem like they've threaded that needle between like authentic and just like grifting or hustling. So like Visa, Michael Ashcroft.
Mm.
There's a few people like that I follow who seem like they found that balance between like providing like enough like I think I've bought like one of Visa's books. I don't think I've ever bought Michael's course that he sells, but like that's okay. Like they don't make that conditional on friendship, right?
Yeah, those two specific
if
cases
you were
really
my
seem
friend,
authentic, though.
What was that?
Those two specific cases that you mentioned, their work does seem very authentic. So
mhm,
we get that
right,
aspect.
not just hustling. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think that? I mean, does this even make sense? Like this difference? Like, have you seen this, or like, what would you say the difference is?
I have, those long threads, not really long, like very simple, that sort of give you a dopamine rush. You think like, you learned something and now they're selling you a course and you buy this, or it's like, oh, this is a free template, but you have to follow so that I can DM you. I don't know if you've seen those threads on Twitter.
Oh no. Yeah. Oh
But,
yeah. I think yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, those kind of seem annoying, and so that's why I don't really follow people nowadays much on Twitter. I just have lists and stuff. So
Interesting.
I did write an ebook that was kind of,
Oh yeah.
but that's because everyone after I got my first software job, everyone kept DMing me and asking me like, how did you do it? How did you learn to code? I'm like, okay, I'm just going to write an ebook about how I learned to code. And then I can just share the link whenever anyone asks me, and that'll be it, And that's, so I wrote an ebook. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, but she never like really, you don't push it. Like, you don't really like, market it too much.
I still get like a sale a month or something, even without any advertising. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But
so I mean, I guess that's been a learning journey for me too, because it's like because I was kind of exposed to that whole kind of culture on Twitter. Like I thought like I would have to like do that, right? I thought I would have to like be like, okay, I'd have to like buy all these courses and then start like, to figure out what my niche is and then sell my own courses. And it's like the more I got into it, the more I realized like I don't even enjoy the process. And like what I really wanted was just like passive income so I could do my own thing. And
Right.
it's like I guess that's the inauthentic part that I don't like, is like all these people that are hustling who don't actually want to hustle. They just want to get as much money from you as possible so they can go off and, you know, play video games or who knows what.
Whatever they
Like
want. Yeah.
whatever their actual desires are, right?
Which I
So
totally am. I mean, I would love to have passive income to just do whatever to make movies or, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
like we had kind of a long-term plan of
Definitely.
maybe like my plan was to get better and better at programming so that I could get a really high salary and start like doing property investing so we could have a bunch of rentals. And anyway, this is like my 10-year plan, you know. Like it was a plan, but it was going to take a while. um I suppose doing the courses thing might have been faster, but just hustling, yeah, just not interested. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think when it goes back, like I said, it's just like, what kind of games do you want to play? And it's like, like I said, the people that hustle, they don't want to be hustling for the rest of their life. They want to just hustle for however many years it takes for them to retire, or whatever game they're playing, right? But it's like, I would rather play a game that I enjoy now,
Yeah.
because I might die tomorrow, right? I mean,
It's possibly some of them enjoy the hustling. It's
but
kind of like a game. It's kind of like,
yeah,
like,
probably the
whoa,
most
these
successful
animals.
ones. Yeah, probably the most
Yeah,
successful
they
ones. Yeah,
actually enjoy
yeah,
it. Yeah,
yeah.
the most successful ones probably actually
They
enjoy
probably get a huge rush out of it.
it.
Just like
Yeah.
some people, what I mean, like, and more power to them. Like, it's fine. It's
Mhm.
just fine. But what I've had to realize in my own self, partly because of my own like school mentality, right, is like all these like people that are selling me courses. I've had to realize like, okay, I could buy their course, but that is not going to guarantee that I'm going to become like them or I get to the place where I want to get, right?
Mhm.
Like I said, like our looking back on our life, it is so unique and so weird. Like we are not following anybody's course, like get rich quick course, right? Like, and we couldn't write our own. Like we literally could not write. I mean, we could, but it would just be we'd be bullshitting. Like there's like,
Right. Didn't someone ask you once, like, for advice about relationships or getting married or
oh
something?
yeah, it's the same thing.
And your answer was like, step one, be Nat.
Yeah.
Step two, marry Martha. That's it.
So the best we can do, like I said, like is like these heuristics, right? Of like put yourself in a place where people like the parties in the cities or on Twitter. What was the other one? Long-term games with long-term people, right? Like stuff like that is like that's coming handy.
How about follow your interests
Oh
too?
yeah, there you
That's a
go.
great one.
That's it.
Like,
Yeah.
if you go on Twitter, find and follow the people who are talking about what you're actually interested in,
Yep.
and talk about it with them, because that's just conversations are happening,
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Well, Nat and Martha, I'm really inspired by a story, and I know others would be as well. Really appreciate you both joining me. And where's the best place for listeners to find your work and to connect?
To find our work, well, our YouTube channel is Nat and Martha Sharpe, right? And we have a joint Twitter account, which is just Nat and Martha, right? Something like that.
Oh yeah, Nat and Martha.
Well, we have
We'll
a
link it.
website. Yeah,
Okay,
we have
yeah,
a
you
website
can
called
drop the links.
natandmartha.com. That's pretty simple. natandmartha.com, and it has links to everything too. So
Okay, and I do have a Substack. I have a Substack because a friend of mine on Twitter challenged me to write a blog post about some of these crazy things I've done. So I was like, okay, I'll do a Substack, but I called it just one blog post.
Oh.
So I'm never.
You're never
people
allowed
keep
to do it again.
people keep subscribing, but I can't do any more posts because it's just one blog post. So you can find me on Substack too, but I'm never going to write anything again.
Unless you create another Substack.